Hello and welcome back to AP World History Modern. Today we're going to begin our second day looking at Unit 3.3, Empires, Belief Systems, and we're going to focus in on the Protestant Reformation in Europe. We're going to be doing some skill practice, some causation stuff. All right, so our learning objective is to explain the continuities and change within various belief systems during the period 1450 to 1750, and we will kind of look at these major changes that are made as a result of the Reformation, right? So the Protestant Reformation. So Protestant protest, right? Reformation, reform, right? So it's a protest and reform movement, Protestant Reformation. All right. So hopefully after doing your homework last night and reading this, you'll kind of see why this is. I'm assuming since I previewed this yesterday that you were doing your homework and reading, and you saw this. You were thinking about this image at home, and you probably just started laughing as you're reading your Strayer textbook, right? Or if you weren't in class yesterday, control yourself from laughing. Right? I thought this was pretty good, though. I was pretty impressed by that. All right, so what are we talking about here today? So let's kind of just do some big picture stuff. And if you're talking about the Protestant Reformation, right, this is an example of a schism, right? And there's some basic kind of verbiage we need to kind of make sure we're aware of and use. And the word schism was in your homework last night, so that's not a word that that kind of matters that much. All right, but let's just kind of throw this down here just to make sure. All right, so schism. All right, and I spelled schism wrong. All right, S-C-H-I-S-M, schism. Right, so this is referring to a split within a religion. And, really from the time that you kind of just talk about the Roman Catholic Church, from the time we see the creation of the Roman Catholic Church, or what will become the Roman Catholic Church, you should go back to the 320s, during the reign of Constantine. There's been a kind of continuity within the church, has been dealing with heretical movements, divergent beliefs within the religion, and trying to get it down to a single belief. And you have relative success at that for the first couple hundred years. So by the time we get past 800s in the Common Era, it's largely been successfully dealt with. Now there are other things going on that that are issues in certain parts of Christendom, like the iconoclast movement and the such. But for the most part, you had a kind of a more unified church until we get into the kind of 900s, and it finally kind of comes to a crisis in 1054. So you'll sometimes see this referred to as the Great Schism, right? The Great Schism of 1054, and really you've got the two most powerful patriarchs within Christendom have a dispute with one another. The Pontiff Maximus in Rome, gets into a theological argument with the Patriarch of Constantinople. The crisis cannot be resolved, and both of them excommunicate each other. And you've got these are the two most powerful factions within the empire, or within Christendom, excuse me. So, it results in a schism that's irreconcilable. All right, so from this, you're going to see these already established patriarchs, will become part of what becomes kind of now referred to as the Orthodox Church. Right, so the Eastern Orthodox Church, or the Greek Orthodox Church, and then the Russian Orthodox Church, the Bulgarian Orthodox Church, etc., etc. Right, and of course, these other older churches that are more similar to kind of Eastern Orthodox than they are to Latin Christendom will just kind of fall under kind of this general, under this general branch. All right, so it's more similar to these than this. All right, so these aren't new churches. None of these are new. It's just a split, right, within the belief systems. All right, and then for the next couple hundred years, the church succeeds pretty well. Does a kind of fairly good job at crushing heretical movements. There's a couple that kind of gain steam. Like John Wycliffe in England, advocating, publishing the Bible in the vernacular of the location in which it is practiced, or John Huss, the Hussites, advocating against indulgences, but these are going to be promptly dealt with. I guess the Hussites were a little less than promptly dealt with. I can't remember if it took 6 or 7 different crusades to stamp out the Hussite movement. But yes, but they are dealt with, right? Until we get to 1517, right? Until we get to 1517. And at this point, it becomes a kind of an issue of time and place, right? Time and place. So, right. So when you kind of look at this schism dealing with Martin Luther, this schism is a bit more understandable. You get the 2 most powerful forces within the church. Here you have the church versus Martin Luther. And who is Martin Luther? Martin Luther is he's just a guy. He's he's an intelligent man, but still he's just an average priest or theologian. And so the fact that he's the one who kind of spins this is one of those things where it is only due to time and place, time and location. And what I am specifically referring to here is this is in the exact same location, right, or very, very close to the same location that about 70 years earlier the printing press was invented. All right, so we'll talk about that. But printing press is the key, right? Is kind of the key thing here, right? So from this schism that we see starting in 1517 with the posting of the 95 Thesis. So with this thesis, we have that kind of split that takes place. And the Roman Catholic Church will survive this and will persist and go through its own counter-reformation. And then, of course, we have the Protestant Church. So the Lutheran churches, which are kind of German-based, is kind of one part of the story. The Calvinist churches. So, after Luther begins this, John Calvin will begin his theocracy in Geneva and begin a whole new branch of Christianity known as Calvinism. And from this, probably most famously are the Puritans, right? So the Puritans are an example of Calvinists. So if you're familiar with the Mayflower in 1620, and right, that is a Calvinist denomination, right? All right, and then of course the Anglican Church, which we will talk about today. And this is kind of different. So like with the Lutheran Church and the Calvinist churches, these are just individual theologians, right, that are getting, either city-states to buy into what they are advocating, or getting small Princetons in central, Germany to agree to split from the church. In the case of the Anglican Church, this is kind of a bigger deal. This is England, right? This isn't a remote, principality. This is England. And so the creation of the Anglican Church is kind of that major turning point in the Protestant Reformation. Any likelihood of ever getting that back into the can is going to be out the window at that point. Right, and of course there's local connections here, right? So the Methodist Church is a local thing. So this is a branch of Protestantism that originates in Savannah, Georgia. Right, so there's kind of that. And of course, here in our district, we've got a very large Methodist center. Right, so because of that proximity there. All right, so we're gonna just break this down based on scale. So your homework last night went through the whole narrative of this and kind of gives you the who Martin Luther was and the 95 Thesis and whatnot. So I just want to put this into a causation chart just for organizational purposes, just to make sure we understand this and really get it. So let's go ahead and if you could create this chart. All right, and actually before we do that, let me just, there's something I forgot to kind of add on to here, and I guess I can come back to this in a second. So go ahead and create that chart. All right, so feel free to pause, create it. All right, so I'm gonna bring this over. All right, and let's start looking at this. So I just have the chart here. All right, and so let's go ahead and begin. All right, so our first row, First row is religious criticism. All right, and what exactly was Luther? What was he complaining about here? Part of it has to do with this. The belief within Roman Catholicism at this point is that salvation, right? Salvation comes through faith and works. And it's the and works in which Martin Luther will have issue with. Another issue, right, another criticism that pops up because of Luther, right, is the practice of indulgences. Okay? So the ability to purchase away sins and whatnot. And this is one of Luther's problems. And then before Luther, John Huss and the Hussites. This is kind of one of their issues. Another issue is purgatory. Right? Purgatory is another kind of one of these issues. All right, so in class I usually just stop here and just to try to figure out, why does Luther have a problem with this? Right? Why does he not have a problem with salvation through faith, but he does and works? Why does he and others before him have a problem with purgatory, indulgences? Right? Why does he have problems with these things? And this is a kind of another concept that you might not be familiar with. So, and this is the concept of dogma. Okay? So, dogma. Right? So, what Luther says is that, or what Luther believes, is that if it's going to be a belief, it needs to be, right? So, belief comes from the Holy Bible. If it is not in the Holy Bible, then it should not be a belief within Christianity. Whereas within the Roman Catholic tradition, you have this thing that is sometimes referred to as dogma. And what is dogma is, right, this is accepted to be true, but does not have a biblical foundation. I'm sure you could probably get a better definition online for dogma. All right, so what does this mean? Right, within the Catholic Church, we have a hierarchy, right? So on top, we have the Pope. Below that, we have the cardinals, the college of cardinals. That, we have our bishops. Right? That, we have our seniors and our priests, the priests, and the deacons below that, and kind of this. Right, so that's kind of the basic, right? But the Pope is the intermediary between God and the Church, right? So a Pope can decree a papal bull, right? And then if this gets approved, right, approved by council, right, these guys, cardinals, this gets approved by council, then it will become dogma. It'll become accepted belief within the church. And this is why there's some things that that Roman Catholics will believe that Protestants will not. Right. So probably one of the most well-known examples of dogma would be the belief in the Immaculate Conception. Right. So belief in the Immaculate Conception is a belief that is held by Roman Catholics, but it is not a belief held by most or any Protestants. Protestants believe in the miraculous conception, but not the Immaculate Conception, while Catholics believe in both the Immaculate Conception and the miraculous conception. All right, so dogma. Right, so this is the kind of the issue that Luther has. Right, so if there's not a biblical foundation or basis for it, then he will be rejecting it. Right, he will definitely be rejecting it here. All right, so let me continue. Right, other issues that come up, right, are issues about usury. All right, that's interest on loans. Okay, and of course, Bible, right? Bible in Latin, right? Is the thing, right? Bible in Latin was the way it was. And of course, before Wycliffe, what is this? John Wycliffe, Wycliffe. Okay, right? Wycliffe, right? Wycliffe will advocate. Right. I'm just going to continue writing this over here because I'm not really going to put anything in the middle one here, right? He will advocate it should be in language, right? In language where practice, right? Make it more accessible. And of course, that is a heretical belief in the 1300s when Wycliffe advocates that. All right, so this is something that is also going to be advocated. All right, so let's go after the Reformation. All right, so what are the effects? Right, what are the effects of this? So let's kind of break down two ways here. Protestants. All right, and I'm just going to give you a couple of this. Salvation. All right, salvation through faith alone. Right, salvation comes through faith alone. Clergy marriage, including Martin Luther. Right. Luther will advocate and succeed in creating a vernacular, right? Bible. Right. So vernacular is the language in which you speak there, right? So in this case here, it'll be a German Bible. All right. And what else? 2 sacraments. Right. So Protestants will generally believe in 2 sacraments because the Bible only specifies 2 sacraments, while Roman Catholics they believe in 7 sacraments. All right, so these are all changes. All right, so these are all, if you're kind of looking at CCOT, these are all dramatic changes. Whereas the story for Catholics, so Roman Catholic, let me zoom in, so I'm going to have to write this probably pretty small, is mostly a story of continuity. There's a little change here, but not very much. It's mostly it's mostly a continuity. And there's really 4 things that the Roman Catholic Church does in reaction to this. And really, they don't really react until, at least not effectively, until decades later. It's going to really not be until the 1540s before you see a serious reaction. And by that point, most of what's going to happen has already happened. All right. So what is this? First off, the Council of Trent. And this actually runs for about 20 years. And what they do is they look at the 95 Thesis. They look at the theological criticisms that were being levied against the church. And they largely reaffirm almost everything. So salvation comes through faith and works. That persists. Indulgences persist. So not much changes as a result of the Council of Trent. It is simply reaffirmed. If you want to identify a change, one of probably the biggest change to come out of the Council of Trent is the advocacy of a formal education for priests. Right. So there's that standardization of education for the priesthood comes out of this. Also, the index. Okay, so the index is a list of books that are banned. Right. So this will come out, and this kind of goes hand in hand with the Inquisition. Right. The Inquisition. And the Spanish Inquisition had already been running for 100+ years by this point. But now we're going to see what becomes known as the Papal Inquisition, right? So this is really the one that creates the index, and of course when you start dealing with the dealings with the heretical scientific issues, the Galileos of the world, that's going to be dealt with by the Papal Inquisition, right? And lastly, probably one of the most significant, is the Society of Jesus, right? The Society of Jesus, aka, homework for next class, the Jesuits, right? So the Jesuits. And the Jesuits are, there's a realization, right, that there is not a kind of an intellectual response to what Luther had presented, right? So this is the intellectual response for this, right? So if you look at the Jesuits and who they were and what they are, it starts in the 1530s at the University of Paris. And it's people like Loyola, right? Ignatius Loyola and Francis Xavier, and they will become the kind of intellectual argument against Protestantism. So they officially become recognized as a monastic order in 1540. And of course, they become a massively powerful and influential movement within Roman Catholicism for the next 160 years. It's really not until the late 1690s that the Jesuits kind of hit a wall as far as kind of the expansion of their influence. And it happens in China, right? It happens under King Z. But when you talk about the spread of Christianity in the second half of the 1500s, the spread of Christianity in Japan, in China, and in Unit 4, when we talk about the spread of Christianity in the Americas, it's going to be the Jesuits on the ground, right? So they will intellectually combat Protestantism in Europe, and they will spread Christianity abroad. So a massively influential organization that comes out of this moment in history. All right. So there's that. All right. What's our next category here? Let me scoot on up. There we go. All right. Next one is technological innovation. All right. So let me move over. There you go. So my second kind of fact row here. All right, so technological. So I'm just doing thematic here. Technological innovation. All right, technological innovations. And all right, so what's the cause of this here? All right, this is of course in the 1450s. Right, in the 1450s, we have Johann Gutenberg, invents the printing press. Right, in Germany. Right, so he famously makes his first run is 200 Bibles that are mass produced on his printing press, and so by the time we get to the Revolution, by the Reformation, so during the Reformation, you have thousands, literally thousands of printers in Europe. Right, thousands of printers in Europe. By this point, there's already hundreds of paper mills. Right, someone's going to feed those printing presses, right? We're already starting to see increased literacy. More and more people know how to read, right? And of course, during the Reformation, the big deal, is that this is how the 95 Thesis will spread. Is it gets mass produced, and it will spread faster than the ability of the church to stop it, right, to slow it down. All right, and of course, our kind of primary effect is we're going to see an increased demand, right, for printed material, right, increased demand for printed material, and of course, vernacular Bibles, right, will only increase. Right, this trend and increased literacy. All right, so and of course, probably the most famous of the vernacular Bibles is going to come in the early 1600s, the King James Bible, right? So King James of England. All right, so I'm going to zoom this out. So we're about halfway through here, right? And I think I made it about this far with all my classes, right? And but in some of my classes, I made it all the way through. So I'm just gonna kind of stop showing you this, and I'm just gonna go ahead and show you the typed versions of this that I just kind of threw together during lunch today. All right, so this is what you should already have, right? This is what you should already have, kind of up to this point, At this point, I generally stop class for a minute to go and check attendance. While I do so, I check. I go ahead and rewatch a clip from the Martin Luther film. So I just want to, I would encourage you to watch this. It's it's right on the channel that you're watching this on right now. And just kind of the things that I explained in class is this begins with Luther. He's already a priest. He's already the movie. This is a full movie called Martin Luther, but this is just a couple clips. So this begins with him going into Rome on a pilgrimage and doing things that you would do on a pilgrimage, like seeing a relic, right? So relics are part of Roman Catholic Church traditions. Very commonly, you will see, there are relics in churches for the saints whom the churches are named after. So he goes to see relics. He purchases an indulgence while he's there. Goes up the Spanish Steps. And has his awakening. Questioning the monetization of Christianity. Then he goes back to Germany, gives a sermon that is questionable as far as going against church beliefs at that point. And then, of course, we see, Johann Tetzel come in, and kind of begin the selling of indulgences, the famous line from Tetzel, whether he said it or not, I don't know, but every time the coffer rings, a soul from purgatory springs, right? Encouraging people to buy indulgences. And of course, this money was being used to build St. Peter's Basilica, right? So, and then of course, the Catherine, the someone who Luther has a concern for, purchase an indulgence. And then, of course, he is concerned by that and is upset by that and tells her that it's not worth the paper it's written on, right? And then this inspires him to write the 95 Thesis, shows him posting it on the door of Wittenberg Cathedral. And, of course, it shows the mass production, because of the printing press, right? The mass production because of the printing press. Here it is, of the 95 Thesis. And then, of course, them trying to shut it down, right? Them being the Catholic Church trying to shut it down. All right. So we watch that clip. It takes about 12 minutes to do so. And I stop at one at times to kind of explain what I just did, right? Just to kind of make sure everyone's understanding. All right. So then I move on and then we get as far as we can with this. We usually get through this far as well. And then a couple classes, we made it all the way. Right, so we talk about the centralization of political authority, right? So before 1517, before the 95 Thesis gets posted, the Catholic Church has a lot of influence in the religious life, throughout Europe. Definitely true. And of course, this is what makes the England story so different. So we have Henry VIII. And I guess I should say before 1517, or I should say right after 1517, because I think it was 1519, that Henry VIII was declared the defender of the faith by the Pope. He was an ardent Catholic and a pious Catholic. But something happens in the 1520s, right? So he's married to Catherine of Aragon, and they're married for about a decade, and they do have a daughter, Mary. But no son is born. And for various reasons, maybe it's because he wanted a son, or maybe because he fell in love with Anne Boleyn. He wants a divorce, and in order to get a divorce within the Catholic Church, you have to get your first marriage annulled, right? And of course, if you are a king, that annulment has to be done from the top, so it has to be done by the Pope. The Pope will refuse the annulment because of who Catherine is. Catherine is the daughter of the Spanish monarchy. And if you know anything about what's going on in world history in the 1520s, Spain is kind of important in the 1520s because of the Americas. If this was the 1490s, who cares, right? The annulment probably would have happened. And if this were the 1820s, this probably would have happened. But this is the 1520s, and Spain is extremely influential because of what is going on in the Americas at this point, and granting an annulment, right, for the daughter of the Spanish crown is not something that's going to happen. So the Pope has to refuse it, and this puts Henry in a situation, right? And of course, how does the Tudor line come into power? The Tudors come into power as a result of the War of the Roses, which is a dynastic battle over who the king's going to be. And if you don't have a male heir, this creates this exact same dynamic, which resulted in a really horrible civil war for England. And this is probably why you see parliamentary support for this. Right, so Henry will ask for the annulment, he will not get it, so then he decides to jump on what's going on over on the continent by separating from the church. And of course, there is some resistance to this. Of course, the great Thomas More story for this. A great play was written on this. It was turned into a film, A Man for All Seasons. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, I enjoyed it, both as a play and as a film, right? But Thomas More will be removed from the path, and the Act of Supremacy will be passed, right? So this will then create the Anglican Church, right, or the Church of England. And of course, once this all plays out, for a short time, Edward will be king, and then Mary will be king, and Catholicism will be returned for a short period of time in the 1550s, and of course Elizabeth will take power. All right, so and of course when Elizabeth takes power, she is gonna kind of make the events that take place in her father's reign. Elizabeth is the daughter of Anne Boleyn, right, the second wife. Right, so she will kind of double down and kind of pass the second of active supremacy, right, in which it officially recognizes that the Church of England is separate from Rome, right, and then the Act of Uniformity creates the standard, right, of a unified Anglican Church, right. So also after that, if you're talking about political authority, we're going to see, the Huguenots are going to face persecution politically as well in France, but I'm only going to mention the Huguenots kind of once here, and it's on the next slide. All right, so this slide after this. So this is actually a double one because I kind of added a Huguenot thing afterwards, so be aware. All right, economic issues, right? So before 1517, trade routes to the Mediterranean are being contested. The Ottoman Empire, the Roman Catholic Church, Roman Catholic places such as Venice, Genoa, right, Spain, Portugal, right. So you've got kind of tension between the Ottomans and these other Roman Catholic places. And this is going to open the door for the British, right? Once they convert, or once they establish the Church of England, the Anglican Church, right? So in the 1580s, England, under Elizabeth II, will sign a commercial deal with the Ottoman Empire, giving British merchants access to the Ottomans, right? Thus cutting out the Roman Catholic city-states, And I guess contextually, it's important to note here that this is shortly after the Battle of Lepanto, in which the Italian city-states and the Papal States and the Habsburgs had all got together to defeat the Ottoman navy. So the British will benefit from this, right? The Mughals, right, will also, open the doors to the British, partially because of Protestantism, right? Because of the Anglican Church, right? So in 1614, Jahangir, right, will invite in the British merchants. And of course, contextually, this is 100 years after the Portuguese had established their trade post empire, kind of going back to Dogma, right? It kind of begins that trade post empire, but there's a lot of tension in the Indian Ocean created because of the Portuguese, and because of largely that tension created because of of the fighting going on between the Muscat, right, the Omani, but also the Portuguese in the south of it, right? So there's a lot of tension between the Portuguese, who are Roman Catholic, and them. And I didn't add it to here, but you could also say the same about the Dutch, right? The Dutch will benefit from this as well. All right, so I'm going to leave this on here for a second. I'm going to get the door. So I'm going on a trip November 4th and 5th. I'm reading over the video. All right. So lastly, kind of economic issues. You are going to see because of this tension between Catholics and Protestants, you're going to see religious persecution of Jews, right, before 1750 with the Spanish Inquisition, also Muslims, right, on the Iberian Peninsula. During the Reformation, right, this will continue, and of course, this is kind of after, right, but it does have effects, right, and it is because of this. So the Edict of Nantes will try to, allow Huguenots to live in France. So a truce is called in the wars of religion because of the Edict of Nantes. So Henry of Navarre will become the king, right? And France will stabilize for a while until Louis XIV issues the Edict of Fontainebleau, which then begins the persecution of the Huguenots again. And the big effect of this religious persecution economically, whether you're talking about religious persecution of Jews in Spain or Huguenots in France, is they will go to places that are religiously tolerant. So, specifically the Benelux countries like Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg. Now, they're not really countries in the 1500s at this point, but these cities are exerting a lot of independence. And by the time we get to the end of the 1600s, mid 1600s, they are going to be separate, right, separated from their neighbors, right? So it's the cities like Amsterdam and Antwerp and Rotterdam. Those are the cities that are going to benefit from this religious persecution, because these Huguenots, these Jews coming out of the Iberian Peninsula, they're going to bring with them, right, when they're persecuted, right, people who can flee will flee, and who can flee, people with money can flee. And of course, many of these people with money have economic ties in other places, such as the Ottoman Empire, right? And so you're going to see, an economic infusion into the Netherlands, right, and places like London as well, right? So in the case of the Huguenots, right? So money will be coming in, expertise will be coming in, trade connections will be coming in, right? So as a result of this, all right, and of course, you kind of look at to wrap this up. Right, you look at the religious map in Europe, right, in 1200. It is a relatively homogeneous cultural map, Orthodox Christianity dominates in the East, Roman Catholicism in the West. You've got Dar al-Islam, but after 1492, that'll change. And of course, after the Protestant Reformation is done, by the time you get to 1564, the Reformation has happened, and you can see the cultural homogeneity in Europe has largely disappeared. Extremely heterogeneous, right, when it comes to culture, especially in Central Europe, kind of ground zero of the Reformation. All right, so that is all for today. All right, so key takeaways, right? So toleration will result in influx of money from persecuted locations. And of course, conversion of conquered people. We'll be dealing with that tomorrow, I guess, or at least starting Unit 4. All right, that is all for today. Sapriati.